The red light glowed, casting an eerie hue over the studio. It was a beacon in the darkness, signaling the start of another night of mysteries. Eric's voice resonated through the small, dimly lit room, weaving tales that danced on the edge of reality. He sat alone, yet the air was thick with anticipation. Midnight was near, the witching hour when the veil between worlds thinned. Eric cherished these moments, the solitude, the connection with unseen listeners. He spoke of ghosts, mysteries, and the unexplained, his words painting vivid pictures in the minds of his audience. Callers would share their fears and stories, their voices trembling with the weight of their experiences. But tonight felt different. An unsettling energy pulsed through the air, a sense of foreboding that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "This is Night Echoes," Eric announced, his voice smooth and deep, like a velvet curtain drawing back to reveal hidden secrets. "Are you out there?" He waited, a familiar shiver running down his spine. The phone line blinked. A call was coming through, a lifeline to the unknown. "You're on the air," Eric said, his pulse quickening. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy like a shroud. Then a whisper, low and raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement, broke the silence, sending a chill down his spine. "Eric," the voice breathed, "I know where you are." The words hung in the air, a sinister promise that made his blood run cold. Eric's hand tightened around the microphone. This was different. This was wrong. The air felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence. He tried to speak, but the voice continued, a chilling wind through dead branches, whispering secrets of the night. "Look out your window, Eric," the voice whispered, its tone laced with malice, as if it knew the darkness that lay beyond. "Tell me what you see." The words sent a shiver down his spine, his eyes wide with fear. Eric hesitated, then turned towards the studio window, his heart pounding in his chest. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson's cat, usually asleep on the porch swing, suddenly darted into the road, as if sensing the impending danger. A truck, its headlights blinding in the darkness, sped around the corner, its engine roaring like a beast unleashed. The screech of brakes shattered the stillness of the night, and a sickening thud pierced the darkness, echoing through the empty streets. Eric recoiled from the window, his blood turning to ice as he realized he was not alone. The voice chuckled, a dry, brittle sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "I told you, Eric! I know!" it hissed, each word dripping with malice. Eric fumbled for the disconnect button, his hand trembling uncontrollably, his mind racing. The voice continued, each word a hammer blow to Eric's sanity. "Don't you want to see what happens next?" the voice taunted, its tone mocking and sinister. Eric's eyes darted to the phone, his mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief, unable to comprehend the horror unfolding. The voice was describing events before they happened, a chilling premonition that left Eric paralyzed with dread. Panic swelled in Eric's chest, a cold, unrelenting grip tightening around his heart. "Who is this?" he choked out, his voice barely a whisper, as if afraid to disturb the darkness. The voice laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Don't you recognize me, Eric?" it rasped, each word dripping with malice. "We go way back. Remember the old well behind the schoolyard?" Eric's breath hitched. The well. Memories flooded back, unbidden and unwelcome. He hadn't thought about that in years, the place where secrets were buried and forgotten. "How do you know about that?" Eric whispered, his voice trembling, the past clawing its way back into the present. The voice continued, weaving a tapestry of Eric's deepest fears, each thread a reminder of his long-buried secrets. Secrets he thought were lost to time, now unearthed and more terrifying than ever. "You were always a curious one, Eric," the voice hissed, a serpent slithering through his thoughts, coiling tighter with each word. "Always poking around where you shouldn't," it continued, its tone dripping with malice. Eric felt a cold sweat prickling his skin, each drop a reminder of his growing dread. The voice was prying into the darkest corners of his mind, unearthing memories he had tried to forget, memories that clawed at his sanity. "Go on, Eric," the voice urged, its tone laced with a sickening sweetness like honey masking poison. "There's something I want you to see," it whispered, the promise of revelation hanging in the air. "Go down to your basement," it commanded, the words echoing like a death knell in the silence. Section 6, the old radio, the basement. Eric's heart hammered against his ribs, each beat echoing the fear that gripped him. He hadn't been down there in years, the memories of that place buried deep within his mind. The voice's words echoed in his mind, a hypnotic command he couldn't resist, pulling him towards the darkness. He made his way downstairs, each step heavy with dread, the creak of the wooden stairs like a mournful cry. The air grew thick and musty, the darkness pressing in like a suffocating blanket, wrapping around him. There in the corner sat an old radio, its bakelite casing covered in dust. Eric's father's radio, a relic of the past. The radio had been silent for years, a ghost of forgotten times. But now it crackled to life, filling the basement with an eerie static that sent shivers down his spine. Section 7. A Voice from Beyond. Eric stared at the radio, paralyzed with fear, his heart pounding in his chest. It emitted a low hum, a distorted static that sent chills down his spine, as if the very air around him had turned cold. And then, he heard it, his voice. But not his voice. It was as if someone or something was mimicking him. This voice was warped, grotesque, a chilling echo of his own, filled with a sinister undertone that made his skin crawl. "Eric is dead," the voice on the radio announced, each word dripping with malicious glee, as if relishing in the horror it was causing. They found his body slumped over the microphone, his eyes wide with terror, frozen in a final moment of unimaginable fear. Section 8. Trapped in the Echoes. Eric's blood ran cold as the chilling realization set in. He stumbled back, his hand flying to his throat, feeling an invisible grip tightening. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one more desperate than the last. The voice on the radio continued, describing his own demise in horrifying detail, as if it were a twisted prophecy. Upstairs the phone lay on the floor, its receiver off the hook, the whispering voice still emanating from the speaker, weaving a tale of dread. "Do you like my story, Eric?" it whispered, the words dripping with malice. It chuckled, the sound bone-chillingly close. "It's only just begun," it promised, leaving Eric paralyzed with fear. Section 9. The broadcast continues. Eric stood frozen, trapped in a nightmare of his own making, his breath hitched as the shadows seemed to close in around him. The radio voice continued its gruesome narrative, feeding on his fear. Each word was a dagger, slicing through the fragile fabric of his sanity. The phone whispered its dark promises, its hold on him absolute. It was as if the very air around him had turned malevolent, conspiring against him. He was caught between two horrors, a chilling echo chamber of his own demise. The devices seemed to pulse with a life of their own, mocking his helplessness. And as the night wore on, the broadcast continued, a terrifying testament to the unseen forces that lurked in the shadows, waiting to claim their next victim. The air grew colder, and Eric knew that escape was a distant dream, swallowed by the darkness.